The Rainmaker's Daughter, the novel book by Richard O. Chapter 1.
They met at one of the swine bars that crop unlike mushroom around downtown Jakarta. He was there waiting with a tumbler of chai proska for Mansur, who never turned up. He would find out later that Mansur had it all mixed up about where they were supposed to meet. He sat by the bar, watching a young bartender flaunt his skill by juggling a shaker with whatever bottle of liquid he happened to be mixing drinks. Meanwhile, a slim young waiter plied subtly between the drink spit and the chiller. By 10 o'clock, the bar had begun to fill up fast. The pervasive new age music humming through the Bose speaker on the ceiling was drowned out by the growing din of conversation. He would feel bodies macing against his back, elbows jabbing his sides. What moment ago smelled like a pleasant whiff, a fine cross between perfumery and cigar, now turned malodorous with body heat and perspiration. She was elbow to elbow with him at the bar, with the crowd passing from left and right. He had nowhere to turn, so on several occasions his eyes inadvertently locked onto hers. He smiled a helpless smile, which she acknowledged with a polite nod of her head. After a view of this awkward moment, he decided to break the ice. "A madhouse, don't you think?" She turned and the long, jet-black hair fell away, revealing a face that was unlike any of those pale, drawn metropolitan faces he was familiar with. It was harsher, more angular, one that could only have been held by the winds, sap in the baking sun. She had dark eyes that gazed back at him with mesmeric intensity, a high-bridged nose that could easily be tittled just a tad if she so inclined to snub anyone who dared to trifle with her. Her thick, voluptuous lips, by their curvature and shape, were undeniably irresistible. She took a quick glance about her, dryly murmured, "Aha!" and returned to her drink. He could have translated her remark in various ways, but chose instead to admit that he had used a rather lame opening line, which showed how out of touch he was with social necessities. Now, he wished the racket in the bar would drown out the tiny voice inside that kept chiding him.
He tried to avert his eyes, forcibly to another side of the bar, but they kept turning back toward her. He couldn't help himself. There was an air of invisibility about her that seemed to incite those in her proximity to take a crack at breaking it. Ordinarily, he would have chosen to stay put, indulging in his little game of speculation. He would have conjured up scenarios in which he fathomed all he needed to know about her. Once his urge to know had been fully gratified, he would have walked away just as he had walked in. She would remain a woman he had met at the bar, a phantom, an evanescence, nonentity, and over time a figment of his imagination. That would have been the best scenario. Everything could end right there. In the morning he would have woken up, maybe with a slight hangover, but in general much the same person he had been the day before. Instead, he did what he ordinarily chose not to do. He crossed over the comfort zone of anonymity into uncertain terrain. He rested his hand from underneath somebody's elbow and reached across the bar counter. "Hadrian," he raised his voice to make himself heard above the racket. She turned and appeared for a moment startled by the impromptu overture. She brushed back her hair and, ignoring the offered handshake, said, "Good to meet you." He waited for her to introduce herself, but she did not. He insisted. He saw the calm leaving her face, as if the protective veil of her privacy had been lifted. Meanwhile, with his hand hovering halfway across the counter and a half smile ascendingly on his face, he waited for her response. When she remained unmoved, he slouched back in his bar stool, fiddling with the stir in his drink slowly deflating. He lost track of how much time transpired, drowned as he was in a self-satisfying funk. Then she leaned toward him and said, "Let's make a deal." "Yes," he replied. "If you promise not to ask me my name, I'll buy you a drink." It did not seem like such a bad proportion. So without giving it too much thought, he said, "Now who wants to know this lady's name here?" He stood up and craned his head in a mock gesture to score for the nosy fellow. "Anyone?" He sat down, turned to her and said with a sheepish smile, "Just as I thought. No one has the slightest desire to know your name here. So we are all right about that." He could see one smile try to break through the impassive face as he ordered the drinks. The bartender passed over the drinks. She returned to her cocoon of silence, and Hadrian sipped his drink and sank deeper into oblivion.
Just as he was about to call it a night, she started to talk. "Tell me," she asked, her big dark eyes turned full on him. "Why do men always think a lone woman at the wine bar always needs company?" He was dumbstruck. This was not exactly the stuff a good conversation got started off with. He shifted in his seat, casting about for the right words. Meanwhile, he felt her scrutinizing eyes bore into him. He shrugged and said, "To get connected, I suppose." She stared at him for a full second and then, as if arriving at the conclusion of a thought, turned away. "That's the tragedy of mankind," she said absently, as if muttering to herself. "Why is that?" He quickly jumped in with a rejoinder, fearing that she would lapse into silence again. Getting connected sounded like a piece of iron in search of a magnet to stick itself to. Why should anyone want to get connected? Since the day they cut our umbilical cords, we have been trying to break free. An infant can't wait to get up on its feet and run. Youngsters daily plot their independence. Adults trapped in the rigmarole of the daily grind try again and again to break away. Of course, they usually fail. She paused and raised her glass. Does the news of alcohol to freedom? Hadrian raised his glass. Or whatever. The woman's brow creased and then her sulky lips curled into what appeared to be a smile. "Ah, good," Hadrian said. "At least someone got a smile out of you tonight. That should count for something. Now let me buy you a drink." Then they become more relaxed. Hadrian found that as she drank more, she became more open and talked without restraint. But much as he tried to elicit more details from her, he came up with nothing more than a few strokes of assumption. From her tawny, sun-baked complexion and her accent, a deep Islander's accent that she did not try to mask, he deduced that she came from a seaside province of Kalimantan. She spoke in a rapid cadence that was at times unintelligible, interrupted by prolonged silence that were broken up abruptly by rants that spilled in every direction. She harangued about abortion, the average of the people's representatives in the parliaments, vagrants paddling on road junction, and the abstract subject of time. You have no clue how fast time goes by, she said, striking a cigarette lighter to life. 1 second, 2 seconds, 1 minute, 1 hour, just like that. Before you can suffer it, claim it for your own, it's gone. She paused and contemplated the wavering flame from the lighter.
Then she raised her thumb and forefinger and tried to nip the flame, which swayed and deflected, tauntingly elusive, refusing to be vanquished. "There's no way you can stop time," she continued. Her face turned into a staunch mask as she watched wisps of smoke trail up from the sides of her fingers. "Unless, of course, you mark each passing moment with pain, real pain." She snapped off the lighter. "Only then can time stand still." Adrian started at her. He had the surprised thoughts that kept sprouting up in his head, one of which was that the woman before him was in all likelihood certifiable. In spite of himself, however, he found himself drawn into her zany monologue. Although he could not make out much of what she said, the intensity of her words gave him an ineffable buzzing giddiness. At 1:30, the bartender hit the gong for the last calls. Adrian awakened to the fuzzy reality of the wine bar. Most of the crowd had left, except for a few stragglers that could still be seen lounging on their sofas in dissipated bliss. He settled the bill and helped her walk to the street. They stood by the curb. She was leaning against his shoulder. He sniffed a faint scan of perfume laced with perspiration. A strange notion dawned on him. How familiar he felt with this woman whom he had met barely a few hours ago. Even now, if he would ever run into her again, he wished he could just stand there and continue sniffing the same mind-expanding scent for as long as his breath held out. He saw a bluebird taxi turn the corner of the street and flag dead. "Time to go," he said. He had never recalled a situation in which he was driven to stay with someone for just a little while longer, but here he was, uncouth and stiff as a lamppost, his heart crying out for her to stay. "Right," she said and straightened up and wobbled into the street where the taxi was waiting. A few steps later, she halted and swung back. "Could you come here for a moment?" she asked. She could hardly stand up straight on her 2 feet. "There's something I wanted to say to you." He walked over. When he was near, she flung her arms around his neck and kissed him on his lips. "Thank you for putting up with my harangue. I wish we had met in more auspicious circumstance." She whispered in his car, slipped into the back of the taxi, and was gone. Long after the taxi has disappeared into the night, he still stood transfixed on the same spot in that street. Nothing stirred in the quiet street except for the amber traffic light and that blinked and blinked in the breezy night. He felt something inside him stir, a faint palpitation that puzzled him no end.